Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting / open discussion. This is Tuesday, February 15th. We did not have a community meeting for a little while here. So the previous one was the 1st of February. So what has happened since then? Well, yesterday we had an exciting release. So version 1.8.0 point and dot is out. So that was released yesterday. You can grab it. You can read the release notes. We announced that to the community yesterday as well. And yeah, we definitely want to chat about it a bit. So Eleanor, I know you're putting you on the spot, but maybe you want to talk about the release.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah, we're really excited to have this release. It has a number of good things. One thing, for instance, is that, sorry, actually, I apologize. I should have pulled it up. One sec. Just if I try to do it off the top of my head, I may be unhappy with what happens. Right. So one thing that's great is, of course, as folks in the community move more and more to CSI drivers, of course, we want to make sure that Velero can back up volumes provisioned by CSI drivers. So we made changes to our AWS and Azure and GCP plugins to make sure that that's the case. So there should be no breaking things going forward. In addition, we did a lot of behind the scenes work in this release. There was some Cube Builder, I believe it was an upgrade. I know that it was kind of modernizing of the code base. We added testing, a test to the ETE tests to, again, just improve confidence in the Velero releases. We also tested IPv6 and IPv4 dual stack and Velero paths. So now we have confidence that Velero can be run on those configurations. We also did have some smaller bug fixes. I will note that this is the first release in a long time we've had to do the release notes without Bridget, who we miss dearly. And so for that reason, we are, if you actually look now at the release notes, they're a little bit sparse, and but we have a PR in progress to kind of what I said we should have up in the next day or two. We're just kind of editing it a bit. So I think that's the big things. Yes, and I see that Jonas is sharing a few details. So any questions, any comments?
So Eleanor, were these images scanned and they were all good from the vulnerabilities point of view?
I believe we do some scanning. It's Sukarna. Good to see you.
Yeah.
I replied to your email actually.
I know. You will see quite a few Dell folks joining in today.
Yeah. The short answer is I believe we've done some scanning. I don't have the details. This is where I'd love to have the engineering team. Dave might know the answer, but okay, then in that case, what I would suggest is if you're able to come to next week's community meeting, evening in North America time, that's when the Beijing team will be there. And they are the ones who I believe do the scanning. So apologies, I don't have the answers for you today.
We should just be able to tag Daniel in the Slack channel and ask him, you know.
Yeah, so we did scan. We were notified of issues with 172, and then we scanned 1.8 also. So they were showing up in Twistlock. So some looked false positive, but some, I guess, were Golang issues. Like most of the items seem to be Golang vulnerabilities. That's how Twistlock scans, which Dell uses. And then I guess the solution is either to upgrade if it is a vulnerability or like document as not applicable. So yeah, okay, I didn't want to hijack it. Maybe we can discuss at the end.
Well, no, you're welcome to bring it up. The problem is that as of now, all of the VMware engineers are in Beijing, and so they won't be attending this meeting anymore, unfortunately, because it's the middle of the night for them. So I just don't think the folks here who have the answers are here. Yeah, Jonas.
Yeah, I think we talked about this yesterday on with the VMware maintainers as well. They scanned it using Trivy, and they did find a few. Yeah, just like you said, Sukarna, there were some Golang issues mostly. So I think an update is coming soon. but it's yeah, it's nothing in Velero itself, but rather the dependencies.
Yeah, so one thing that would help is sometimes if it's even Golang, but if it doesn't affect claiming, writing as not applicable also is okay. So we are getting hit a lot by the enterprise customers, right? They all do these scans and they want an answer. Either it is not applicable because the function, the way library is used doesn't apply, or the ask is like, when will the new update come?
Do we have this as an issue already, Eleanor? You know?
Not to my knowledge, we've been emailing a little bit, but
Okay.
I think to Dave's point, this would be a really good conversation to have out of, I think everyone might be interested. So if you could ask it on the Kubernetes Slack and tag Daniel, who might be a reasoner. I can't remember his, I'm looking now. Not, let's just see.
So yeah, so one of the related asks, I guess, on the thread.
Oh yeah, sorry,
is,
just Daniel Jang. So if I'll put the thing, if you can just tag him in the Kubernetes Slack and the Velero users, Velero dev Slack channel, then you should be able to get the answer. We can have this conversation there.
Okay.
Feel free to keep asking your questions. I'm just saying for this particular one, he can hopefully answer the particular question.
Right. So the other question we were discussing in the thread was, is 1.7.2 a possibility built with the latest 1.16.
Yep. Our short answer is yes. 1.7.2 is absolutely a possibility to fix the CVEs, because we certainly want Velero to not have CVEs, and so it's very much a possibility. And again, like I think we're going to do it, but this is where having that conversation where you and Daniel can talk directly would be really helpful, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
So your recommendation is use the Velero Slack channel?
Yep. Yeah, I just put a comment. So Velero Dev in particular, because that's where we kind of have Velero development related chats. For folks to know in general, Velero users is where users kind of seek help from each other. But if we're talking about a development issue, then Velero Dev. And then Daniel Jang is the tech lead, and he's based in Beijing. So for asynchronous communication, the Slack channel is great.
Okay. So and so who decides whether 1.7.2 can be done? Daniel?
I mean, we're basically have decided that we'll do it, and it's just about timelines and such. Like that's what I want to confirm. Like I don't know how long it'll take the team to do it. Your questions about whether the existing ones are applicable, but basically I believe we will do a 1.7.2. I just want to confirm that the timeline we can do work, satisfies user needs, and I want to make sure that we will be removing the CVEs that you're concerned about. That's what I just want to make sure we hammer out in the Slack channel.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, there will be some validation needed for 1.7.2. So we are hoping that folks who are requesting this 1.7.2 can help us a little bit with the validation, but we can hammer that out too later as well.
Sure. Yeah. We can help us. I'm not sure we are familiar with the process, but whatever needs, if we can discuss. And
perfect. And that's exactly what I think we can also discuss. So perfect. So basically start a thread there and we can continue that conversation.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh, thank you for bringing it up. It's I'm sure that more than just your users are concerned by this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on 1.8? All right, awesome. Let's see here. Does anyone have any other status updates? Looking at the maintainer team here, we got Dave and Scott. Do you have any status updates for today?
No, I'm still working. I'm working through the PR comments on the item snapshotter stuff. And Eleanor asked me to put something into the release notes about cool things we did in 1.8. So I'm going to figure that out in a little bit.
Yeah, not much me other than peer reviews, and then the issues that Shubham has to discuss are ones I've been involved in those as well. In the discussion topics.
All right, awesome, thank you. Yeah, so then let's dive into discussion topics. I don't know why I put this here. We're not going to change anything. That was a discussion that we had, that we're not going to change anything right now. However, we will have a new community manager joining the Velero community here. I hope he can be here, probably not next week, but the week after that. Orlin Vasilev will be joining the Velero community as the community manager in a couple of weeks. So I will be handing things off to him. And for those of you who are a little confused and remembering, wait, didn't we already talk about this a couple of weeks ago? And there was some other person? Yes, that is true. But the current plan right now is for Orlin to join the Velero community as the community manager within a couple of weeks. So you will see him in the Slack channels and threads and on meetings. So hopefully, yeah, again, probably not next week, but the week after that, he will be a part of the community meeting. So we'll see him then. All right. Any questions there? Okay. Discussion topics, Eleanor.
Sure thing. So 2 bits today, as you can see. One thing is, we've been toying for a long time about bringing the CSI plugin to GA, the Velero CSI plugin to GA. To remind folks, at least one of the major reasons we have not so far is because CSI snapshotting can be implemented in different ways on different systems. On AWS and Azure, for instance, if you use a CSI snapshotting mechanism, in EBS, for instance, it'll take the snapshot, and EBS will of its own accord move that snapshot to a different storage location, and so that snapshot is durable and safe, and yay. So for instance, if you use the CSI plugin on AWS, it'll work well for customers. On the other hand, take vSphere, which doesn't have CSI snapshotting yet, although it will soon. vSphere, when you do their snapshotting mechanism, it does not move the snapshot. It's a non-durable snapshot. And so the Velero plugin for vSphere, after triggering a snapshot, needs to move that snapshot to a different storage location than the primary storage, so that in the event of a disaster, and the primary storage is lost, that the secondary storage, so that the snapshot is not lost, the backup is not lost. So our concern is on other platforms, if someone is CSI snapshotting, we don't really know whether they are like AWS and actually moving the snapshot behind the scenes, or whether they're like vSphere, which for their own snapshotting mechanism is not moving it. So again, we've been dragging our feet because we haven't seen the need so far to bring the CSI plugin to GA because of those kind of product concerns, as well as there may be technical concerns that I actually don't know about yet. But I finally have a use case that makes me think that we should consider going to GA. And so I wanted to tell folks here that we're considering it. I actually just created an issue, which I can put in the chat. Maybe someone can put it into the WebMD while I'm talking, because I can't really multitask. And so the use case is this. So number one is what I was just talking through about things that are blocking GA, and number two is hey, there's probably technical bits I don't know about. And then there are 2 reasons, though, to bring it to GA. Reason A is what we've known about for a while, which there may be more systems that implement CSI snapshotting that users want to use. So far, we have had kind of independent Velero plugins for each of those systems. We haven't really heard about a commonly used system that needs it. But reason B is something that's just come to my attention, and I'd really love to hear folks' thoughts on it. It's the idea that when you have Velero handling credentials for, say, AWS or Azure, my understanding is that they have to kind of, I guess the credentials are just sitting there in the cluster. Engineering folks, you can tell more, I'm sure. And it's just a big security risk. And my understanding is, for sure for AWS, and I'm verifying for Azure, that if we actually use the CSI plugin instead, then AWS will handle credential rotation automatically. This will be true for EKS, for Tanzu, for OpenShift, probably for others who use AWS. And so that would be a much more secure environment for our users. So let me pause there. Like, does that resonate with folks? This is something I'm thinking of making like a P0, like this investigation, at least, of bring to GA, learning what we need to do, what the next steps would be. I'm thinking of making as like a highest priority item for our Beijing team members for 1.9, but I'd really love to hear what the community thinks.
So this will be an optional plugin that users can install or be part of the.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me clarify. Sorry, that was stupid. I took a bite of food. This is my lunchtime. To clarify, right now, if you are an AWS, sorry, let me swallow.
No,
Learn my
Kevin.
lesson. Do not. No, I've learned my lesson. Don't take a bite right after I ask for questions and comments. I'm all good now. So interestingly, let's look at AWS, and so someone with an EBS volume. Right now, there are two different paths to do that volume snapshot. You can use our AWS plugin, which is I think what most folks do, and it uses a certain path, and in the end, EBS hands back a volume snapshot ID, and Velero runs with it. In that method, the credentials I believe are less secure, AWS credentials. On the other hand, the CSI plugin uses a totally different path, but it still actually triggers the same, it still gets the same ID back, the same volume snapshot ID back, but the CSI plugin would do it in a more secure way with credential rotation. So the answer in short is I don't believe that you or anyone, your Dell customers or anyone would have to move to the CSI plugin, but if folks have the security concerns I'm starting to hear about, then the CSI plugin would be an option. Let me stop there. Dave also, or others may have more to say, but let me pause there.
Yeah. So somebody else talking? No. Yes, I think those are reasonable reasons to move forward. We've gotten a lot of complaints in various areas where like, hey, we don't want to have credentials exposed into the cluster. And, for good and bad, it's still going to require that there be an S3 identity available. Though I think there was some work being done to like use the nodes IAM to talk to S3 and talk to the bucket. So that would be a change in like the AWS plugin as well. So yeah, ideally there's like, well, I'm not sure about ideal. It's kind of an interesting situation, but the possibility of not having any credentials present in the cluster for backup would probably be a good option at least.
Just to clarify what you were saying, you're saying that the move to the CSI, or if we brought the CSI plugin to GA, it would solve all these issues? I was confused what you meant about the AWS plugin.
So right now there's two sets of credentials. There's one set of credentials that's used for volume snapshotting.
Yes, the volume snapshot location, right?
Right, and then there's a set of credentials that are used to talk to the object store.
Right. Okay. So each of the targets has different credentials. Okay.
Right, and so then moving to CSI gets rid of the need for the volume snapshot credentials.
Oh yes, of course. But the backup storage location credentials would still exist.
And there was some work. There's been an ask to merge some stuff into the AWS plugin that would allow it to use the per node credentials, the same way the CSI driver does.
Okay.
Node
Whereas of course
or yeah, I'm sorry, I don't know about the node credentials. Can you
like an AWS, each worker node, each EC2 instance gets like a default set of credentials that you can fall back to, and that's actually attached to the node. It's outside of the OS.
Sure. Sorry, is there like an issue or something I can reach? I'm not following how that would work.
It's just you have to configure the you just use the SDK in such a way that it goes ahead and uses the per node credentials. Ping me on Slack. I don't remember the details offhand.
all that's to say, Sean, is I think that this is more an addition. I think Dave is pointing out that this it's really good for me to note, bringing the CSI Snap plugin to GA will not solve all of our problems. And so he's discussing another way to solve the existing problem. I would say that at least for I think that what he's suggesting is not what I'm suggesting for 1.9 right now. I'm more suggesting the CSI plugin. So
yeah, there's been some asks to get this into the AWS plugin. It shouldn't be a lot of work, but shouldn't, right?
Right. All that's to say is feel free to continue the conversation. Just the good news is I don't need to know immediately on that one because that's not, yeah. And so just to explain one last thing is that then folks who were using the AWS plugin can choose to use the CSI plugin on AWS, for instance, or the CSI plugin, but use it on Azure. So for them, well, actually, I'm rambling. Okay. Any other thoughts on this before I move to my second discussion topic or questions?
Right. So, so look for PowerPoint, yeah, it does the CSI snapshotting. So I wanted to make sure that CSI it will be an optional plugin that users can install or not install.
Sorry, help me understand. You said for power. Do you mean the storage? What do you mean Power Protect has CSI snapshotting? Like it triggers CSI snapshotting, or it has storage that enables CSI snapshotting?
No, both. So it does creates the CSI snapshots and then moves the snapshot to its storage, right? Power Protect YouTube storage. So
In a lot of configurations, Power Protect doesn't use the Velero volume snapshotting.
That's what I was wondering. Okay, gotcha.
Right.
So for that, then I don't think it would matter to Power Protect if you're just not using the
Yeah.
Velero volume snapshot, or it doesn't really matter to you what we switch to, right?
Right. It's just
So-
that go ahead.
No, so eventually what should be happening, the thing that should be happening is the volume, there's the -- volume snapshots option to Velero.
Mhm.
If that's not set, none of the volume snapshotters should get triggered, CSI or anything else. That may not be true at the moment, but that needs to get fixed. I'm pretty sure the vSphere plugin, if you install it, will always get triggered. But that should be fixed. I think the CSI snapshot obeys that, but I'm not sure.
Correct. So the way PowerPoint avoids it is it excludes the PVCs and PVs. So that also avoids this.
But needless to say, Sukarna, in general, this is just taking an existing plugin that's beta and
Right.
bringing it to GA. It's basically adding another option for users, and in the future we may all need to switch to it as everyone moves more to CSI snapshotting. But for now, it'll just be a ready to go option as opposed to a beta option.
Sure.
So I would anticipate for Dell, it shouldn't change anything unless you want to use it.
Sounds good.
Great.
I did want to bring up one thing, which is, wouldn't whoever is providing the CSI drivers with credentials would still be responsible for handling the credentials? So it wouldn't necessarily get rid of credentials, it would just move the responsibility away from Valero's volume snapshot or stuff from having to deal with the credentials, right?
Right. So there's a
Okay.
couple of different paths, right? So like I think if you do an EKS setup, the credentials for the CSI driver are the node credentials or what it uses. So it's not visible from inside the Kubernetes cluster. There's a similar setup. So, VMware has too many TKGs. So TKGI, their CSI implementation puts the credentials into the node OS, and it's not visible from Kubernetes versus like the vanilla path where they're visible from where the vSphere credentials are a secret in the Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, I think let me take a step back. Sorry, I'm asking questions that probably have no context. I believe that we should totally move this forward to GA. I totally think that makes sense. What I'm trying to make sure is that like we're not saying that we're going to be able to do things that like are just pushing the problem off. So like in this use case, I still think that like somebody's just going to be responsible for like some sort of credential request responses. Like if you're using Velero, it now matters like how you're using Kubernetes, where you're using Kubernetes, and how those credentials are managed for the CSI driver, which is fine. Just wanting to throw it out there that like it's not going to immediately solve the problem for every user, but it is going to remove it from our responsibility, which is probably a good thing. But I just wanted to I just wanted to throw it out there that like that's what's it. Anyway. Maybe that's
so what we've
it's
seen
helpful.
is people are asking for this. The Kubernetes platform will go ahead and implement this, and then we come back with the backup application. We say, well, actually, though, we still need those credentials, so put them back.
Well, and also, oh gosh, and I'm going to try to reproduce what one of the Tanzu tech leads said, but he said something about how if basically that we have to like, you don't have to, I mean, maybe that's what automatic credential rotation is. I don't really know. But basically that if we allow, at least for Tanzu, allow the platform to if Velero doesn't need it directly, then AWS can handle more of the credential rotation, all that. So it does not make it inherently safer, or does that resonate with you? I'm talking about an area I know very little about. So basically he said because Velero needs it, we have to actually put the credentials in the cluster, whereas apparently he thinks we do not need to if we use the CSI snapshotting.
It'll depend on the CSI implementation.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so like, yes, it resonates to a certain degree, but it also, to certain
I see what you mean.
situations,
It's deferring it to the CSI implementation of the
Yeah.
platform as opposed to Velero.
Right.
Yeah,
So then
the
we can blame them.
platform, yeah, both the platform you're using, so like, you know, however you're using Kubernetes, and then also the individual CSI plugin is gonna defer the problem completely to them. I still think it makes total sense to do it, but I don't know if it like immediately gains users the ability to do automatic credential rotation just because we switch to CSI.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe it's more of a language thing. Yeah, to me, also it's separation of concerns. Like I really want Velero just to have to worry about data protection and not about security. And to me, this allows us to like hand it off to the platform who may be better equipped with security experts or something. But I absolutely hear your point. I will make another note in my issue. Yes.
I mean, the good thing is that, see, right now, if you do have a platform that solves the credential problem with CSI, we're asking the customer to take a step backwards. And that's not very popular.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%.
So, yeah. So so when we get to the point where you don't have to ask for additional things beyond what the platform already requires, we're in a better situation.
I'm just documenting. Any other thoughts on this? I really appreciate all these points because it's helping me understand the implications better. Needless to say, if folks do find this useful, it's worthwhile to do a thumbs up on it, just to show, help us keep track of who's interested.
So one question is what happens if for say on-prem storage, like CSI on-prem storage, so it will take the snapshot, but no data movement happens.
I'm so sorry. What was the question? I'm so sorry. I was just finishing my comment on this issue.
No, so Dave was mentioning, right, that depending on the storage provider, the behavior will change. Like if it is vSphere, then there will be data transfer plus snapshotting, whereas for AWS, you will just do the snapshot and have the underlying storage do the transfer to secondary storage. So then, like for on-prem, so is that controllable behavior, Sumit?
Well, actually, I'm going to take a first stab, and then I'm going to hand it off to Dave. So that is absolutely still a concern, and I don't have a great answer for that. In my mind, by bringing the CSI plugin to GA, I would want to be able to say AWS and Azure users, where we know underneath the hood CSI snapshotting has data movement, use it. Please use it. It'll make things potentially more secure for you. I have enormous concerns about non-AWS and Azure platforms, and we still have that reason one of why we have not brought it to GA so far. A question I have is I know that we've really been thinking about moving the data mover from the Velero plugin for vSphere to Velero proper. We're going to want to start that work in 1.9. We've been talking about this for a while. Is it possible to kind of hook the data mover into the CSI plugin so that on, say, a platform that needs it, we could move the snapshot? Is that doable but hard? Not doable? I guess, yes, that's a question for folks here.
So our 1.9 plan was to get data movement into Velero. And then once that was available, go ahead and enable the CSI snapshotting. So that was the original plan. You can certainly go ahead and enable it or bring the CSI snapshot into GA and tell people, it's like, watch your fingers,
Yep. Use at your own risk.
Don't do this. If you're in this situation and you do this, you're not going to get what you expect. You should continue to use resting. That's just messaging, and all it's really going to result in is tears from people who didn't read the instructions and then wound up in a bad place. I think personally, I think data movement was really important for Velero, so that was I would try to keep that on the roadmap. As far as putting the data mover into the CSI plugin, that's a possibility, but it's probably about as much work as putting it into Velero.
Sorry. Oh yeah. I'm not sure where it lives. I guess I'm more wondering if the data mover's in Velero, the CSI plugger can easily use it, correct?
Yes and no, because what we have implemented at the moment in the Velero plugin is both the snapshotting through vSphere, and that would get replaced with the CSI snapshotting. So that path is good as soon as vSphere implements all that. The other thing is the data mover itself currently only talks to V80P, which is the VMware
vSphere specific.
data path.
Yeah, that's not useful.
Right,
I mean, if we want to go more general, yeah.
So then that's where we were looking at doing data paths via the Astrolabe stuff. And implementing like EBS Direct. And there was also, on my roadmap, there was a generic path. So with CSI snapshotting, there's currently no data path defined. So if all you have is the standard stuff, you can only use the CSI APIs. And that would require us to do snap, clone the snapshot to a new PV, then attach the PV to a container, to a pod, and then use something like Restic or Copia or tar to extract the data. And that would give us a generic path. The other thing that would let us do is that would let us unify CSI snapshotting with Restic. But there's a whole bunch of interlocking moving pieces that have to happen.
Yeah. Well, my inclination from a prioritization point of view is there is clear value. Like, I think most of our users use Velero on AWS or Azure or potentially vSphere. That I know less about the overall user base. But all that's to say is that bringing the CSI plugin to GA and making it and knowing that it works for Azure and AWS users, that has clear value. It reduces the security risk that's currently present with the credentials. This idea of putting in data movement for the non-platforms, I guess as Dave's saying, I would prefer to have really clear messaging of like, please don't hurt yourself. These are the risks. And then as we see use cases of platform X that has CS, that needs this, then we can start thinking about doing this work and seeing how much there's user need. And in parallel, I still want to move the data mover to Velero for a number of other reasons. And that knowing that we have that as a possibility in the future is good, but I'm not sure if I would hook it up to the CSI plugin until we see specific asks for it.
There were a couple of other concerns with CSI that I wanted to make sure we had fixed as we moved forward to GA.
Okay.
And one of them is the scalability, because the CSI snapshots are a little different from the other snapshots in that every time we take a CSI snapshot, we leave a record hanging around in the Kubernetes cluster. So if you have 1,000 volumes and you snapshot all of them, now suddenly you get 1,000 snapshot content or volume snapshot records plus volume snapshot content records. You get 2,000 new records, which we then go and back up on the next pass.
Okay.
So I was planning to change the way we used the CSI snapshotting, so we didn't leave the records hanging around, but just kept the pointers in the backup. And there's also the issue of lifecycle management of the snapshots after the namespace disappears. Because if you have a namespace and you back it up with CSI snapshots, that's fine. But then if you delete the namespace, but the backups still exist, in order to clean out the snapshots, you need to create a snapshot record somewhere. You need to statically provision the volume snapshot and volume snapshot contents. And that needs to happen somewhere. And since the original namespace doesn't exist anymore, you gotta set it up so it does it in like a special place, which I don't believe that's not there in the current code. I think that's necessary. So there's a couple issues that we need to take care of, but scalability testing would be a prime one, and making sure that, you know, we can handle, you know, n backups with